A few months back when the RTX 4080 4070 Ti launched, while we could get graphics cards for under the suggested MSRP here in Malaysia, for the very first time, reviewers in the US like Linus have reported an entirely different story altogether. This time it seems like Nvidia has tightened its reins and set two separate launch dates for the RTX 4070. Today for graphics cards that follow the suggested MSRP, and another one tomorrow for those that just don't want to play ball. In my opinion, and yours too probably, at 3,049 ringgit, the RTX 4070 is the true mid-range card that people are actually looking for. So let's just compare it to the 4070 Ti and 4080, as well as last gen 3080 to see if you should whip out your wallet to grab one. We got gaming benchmarks, ray tracing, DLSS, Aputure bench, and a lot. So let's get cracking. Looking at market sentiments towards these new GPUs, when I said mid-range, I mean barely, just barely. Personally, I wouldn't pay above MSRP for a 4070, where value for money is going to play a more crucial part in terms of a purchase consideration, which is why I decided to check out the Asus Dual model instead. Specs-wise, the 4070 has 23.5% less CUDA, RT, and Tensor cores when compared to the 4070 Ti, but the exact same specs in terms of VRAM. It also has a lower TGP or total graphics power, which makes it actually more appealing towards mid-range gamers who don't necessarily want to upgrade their power supply units just to slot in a new GPU. Compared to the last gen 3070, though the core counts remain exactly the same, we are getting updated 3rd gen RT cores and 4th gen Tensor cores, as well as a new Ada Lovelace architecture. The VRAM has also been bumped up quite a bit in terms of quantity and also speed, which is very important at higher gaming resolutions, all the while keeping a lower power draw, which is, great. Judging by that MSRP, the 4070 seems more appropriately positioned in the mid-range when compared to the Ti, and if it performs on par with the RTX 3080, it would provide us with decent value for money. Fun fact, I've never actually owned or even touched an Asus Dual graphics card before because I'm a bangsawan, and also because they just look very basic and not my cup of tea. Which is why when I did the ASMR unboxing for this Asus Dual RTX 4070, I was actually pleasantly surprised with the card, even though I wasn't a big fan of that eco-friendly packaging. While it doesn't come with RGB, this Dual material fan shroud that is clear on top and also matte black for the rest with a, nice backplate to match, just looks sleek AF. To top things off, that dual fan combo as well as that sizable heatsink managed to keep the card relatively cool during our stress test while staying very quiet, to be honest. It just looks like the perfect card to stick into an ITX build. If you're interested in this particular graphics card, feel free to check out the links in the description, as it will support us to make more videos like this but won't cost you anything extra. Before we jump into the benchmarks, these are the specs to our test bench. Taking a look at the numbers, starting off with 3D Mark tests, it is evident that the new RTX 4070 has been beefed up considerably in terms of pure rasterization performance compared to last gen. We are seeing up to a 23% uplift over the RTX 3070 and numbers that are neck and neck with the 3080. Compared to the 4070 Ti, however, there is still a respective 22 to 37% gap, which seems to justify the 16+% price difference. Next, we tested 8 different games. Do note that for this card, 1080p scores are largely irrelevant, but I still included them in case you are curious. Firstly, we have Shadow of Tomb Raider, where you can see performance scaling that is similar to the Time Spy tests, which is again mirrored by Cyberpunk 2077. Interesting enough, the performance gap is narrowed a little with Horizon Zero Dawn and Dying Light 2. Death Stranding is again being an oddball that showed very minor differences between all cards. With newer titles like the recent Resident Evil 4 remake, we even saw the 4070 outperforming the 3090 by 13% in 1440p and within 3 frames per second in 4K. Something else that you should pay attention to is how much better this new card is compared to the 3070 in terms of 4K gaming. We managed to hit over 60 frames per second for all games other than the notorious Cyberpunk 2077. Finally, for those who are mainly playing FPS titles like Doom Eternal or Valorant, there's really no point in upgrading. Now, ray tracing is one of the main reasons why you might consider the switch to the newer 40 series, so let's take a closer look. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider with DLSS off, the RTX 4070 is 40+% slower than the 4070 Ti, which was kinda expected due to the lower RT core count, but it pulled ahead from the 3070 by up to 23%. In fact, it was even faster than the 3080 in all resolutions. By switching on DLSS, you are closing the performance gap with the Ti by up to a whopping 20%. In Cyberpunk, while the 4070 Ti is still the arguably better card for 4K, the 4070 still got us relatively respectable numbers that are miles ahead of the 3070. The lower VRAM on the 3070 really showed its age in 4K especially. Surprisingly, when you switch on DLSS, the 4070 is pretty much neck and neck with even the 3090. So if 1440p and even 4K ray tracing is what you're interested in, especially with newer AAA titles that support DLSS, there is really no reason not to consider the upgrade from the 3070. I even tested ray tracing in Resident Evil 4 remake, which is honestly not the most stable at the moment. It also doesn't support DLSS, so we can just take a look at the pure ray tracing performance. As you can see, the 4070 is giving us almost double the frames per second as the 3070. In fact, the 3070 flat out crashes every time I try to run the game in 4K. For productivity workloads, we are going to start with Puget Bench. If you mostly use Photoshop, After Effects and Premiere Pro, I would just skip the 4070 as it only performed up to 11% better than the 3070, which is quite a bit cheaper now. However, with tasks like DaVinci Resolve that utilizes more VRAM, that 20% uplift over the 3070 would definitely be worth looking at. For 3D work, on the other hand, the 4070 is quite a bit better than the 3070 with a performance increase of around 25%. Overall, only upgrade to the 4070 in terms of productivity tasks if you work with 3D or need that extra VRAM. Finally, since I've already shown you the thermals and acoustic numbers just now, let's take a look at power consumption. Looking at power draw, I think that a safe PSU spec to pair this card with would be around 550 to 650 watts, depending on your CPU and other hardware. With our system, with the i9-13900K, a safer bet would be around 650 watts. Of course, in my opinion, there is no overkill for PSUs, only budget constraints. So, the RTX 4070, is it any good? And which among us should or shouldn't consider the upgrade? Firstly, for gamers, if you care about ray tracing and you're coming from an older graphics card up to even an RTX 3080, just go for it. If you don't care about ray tracing, I would skip it if you already own something that is RTX 3080 and up, but I would still upgrade if you're coming from a 3070 if you care about 1440p and 4K gaming because of that significant VRAM bump, especially considering how much 1440p and 4K displays have really come down in price recently. Next, if you want a game in 4K and your game supports DLSS, then the 4070 would still be a good buy. If not, especially with older games or console ports, then you would still have to game in 1440p if you want to play at max settings. For productivity purposes, I would only consider upgrading if you're coming from a 3060 Ti and under. That uplift lift from the 3070 is still not big enough to warrant an upgrade for the most part. Just keeping it real, if you've been following us, then you'll realize that I have basically snoozed on the 4070 Ti. Why? Because I really thought that it was a very awkward launch that I couldn't be bothered covering. If you're already considering a 4070 Ti, you might as well just pay a little bit more for the RTX 4080. But that's just my hot take, okay? This RTX 4070, however, is really closer to what mid-range gamers actually asked for. We are getting a huge jump in performance over the 3070 at a still pretty decent price point if you buy it closer to the MSRP, that is. Also, considering the lower power draw, you'd have no issues buying this and just strapping it into your existing build without upgrading your PSU for the most part. And if you get something smaller like this Asus Dual, for instance, you can even stick it to an ITX build and still play with ray tracing on in 4K. But you know what? I still want to end this video with some food for thought. So I've been asking myself, am I just happy about the value that the RTX 4070 is providing simply because how bad I thought the Ti was? Also, since when have we all collectively accepted that 3,049 ringgit or $599 is the price point for mid-range gaming? For some context, you can get the PS5 for around 2,000 ringgit here in Malaysia, and a 4K TV would go for as low as 1,299 ringgit. And that is everything I have to say about the RTX 4070. If you thought this video was helpful, don't forget to like and share so that more people will see this video. Also, leave a comment down below if you have any questions regarding the RTX 4070 and I'll try my best to reply to you. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to see more content like this, and don't forget to follow us on TikTok, Facebook and Instagram to see more shenanigans from the Mob House crew and just hang out and chat with, you know, the team. Again, my name is Bangsawan Shane and I will see you in the next one.